The OCD and Anxiety Podcast by Robert James Coaching. Hello and welcome to the OCD and Anxiety Podcast, where we explore how to have a more positive relationship with anxiety disorders, taking back control so that you can start living the life you choose and not the one chosen by your fears. Hello and welcome to episode 423. I hope that you're doing very well wherever you are. There's a big storm here today, and so today's episode is really influenced a little bit by that. If you are struggling with the storms of OCD and you would like to get some support with that, well, you can by heading over to my website, robertjamescoaching.com. There you can book in for a free session with me, or if you prefer, you can send me a message and let me know about what you're struggling with. Today's podcast, as just mentioned, is all about learning how to find hope in the struggle, the storm of OCD, recognizing that we can harbor hope, that we don't have to necessarily get out there and start fighting with that storm of the OCD, that we can learn to let the storm pass. And so really hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, it would be amazing if you could subscribe. That really does help. And if you have any questions, do please let me know. Off we go. There is a classic children's book from the UK that is called The Mousehole Cat, and it's based down in the very southwest of England in Cornwall. And it really portrays the story of this fisherman and his cat Mouser. And the fisherman has to go out into this storm, and to get out there into the storm, he has to leave the shelter of the harbour. And there's a very, very narrow entrance into the harbour, and it's called the Mousehole, or Mousehole as they would pronounce it in Cornish. And the story really portrays this kind of metaphor of the storm being like a cat that is playing with the fishing boat, playing with Tom the fisherman. And it's a beautifully written story. And I love these kinds of things and how we can actually apply these kinds of simple metaphors to the struggle of dealing with OCD and anxiety. You know, I think so often we think that we have to go out through that mousehole, out into the dangerous seas of OCD, and to take on the challenge of it, to constantly be looking to problem solve it and fix it and find the ultimate solution to it so that we can finally defeat it once and for all, put it to bed and not have to deal with it again. And this is what really it's like to venture out into a stormy sea in a little fishing boat. You know, when perhaps you would be better off taking an alternative plan. Perhaps you would be better off staying at home in your warm, cozy cottage, you know, waiting for the storms, the rains, the winds to kind of calm down, and then to kind of venture out, you know, out there into the sea again and to take action. Now, it may not always be that simple, of course. You know, sometimes we do have to get out there into our lives, despite the fact that we might want to stay at home. We might not want to take on the challenge. And, you know, it is important sometimes that we do that. But it's as we are doing that, it's also important to recognize that, you know, although we're going to get out there and live our lives, despite the fact that we have OCD, at times we do need to wait for the storm to pass. So as we are out there living our lives, doing whatever it is that we have to do in our day-to-day life, the important thing is to recognize that, you know, we shouldn't be too harsh on ourselves. We shouldn't expect too much sometimes. When we are going through a challenging moment, maybe you're experiencing a setback, for example. Maybe you've been doing much better and suddenly things seem very difficult again. Or maybe it's just a real OCD storm for some reason. It's really difficult in that moment. You're getting a lot of intrusive thoughts. You're really struggling with the urges to perform the compulsions. If in these moments we get really angry and upset with ourselves, we tend to make the situation much worse. And this is kind of the least compassionate thing we can do for ourselves. And as we've talked about, self-compassion is really, really important when it comes to navigating OCD, perhaps navigating our way back to the harbor of hope rather than getting caught up in the storms and the tyranny of OCD. And so finding a way back to that harbor, it doesn't necessarily involve you kind of, not taking on challenges in your life or, not leaving your home. Of course, that's important that we do that. We need to carry on, I think, with our lives as much as we can when we struggle with OCD. Acceptance commitment therapy, for example, is all about thinking about what your values are and choosing to focus on those things despite the fact that you may be experiencing the storm. To try to kind of, plot that path despite the fact that you're not feeling 100%. But at the same time, we need to recognize that, when the storm is going on, we do need to be kind. We do need to recognize that it's okay to not be 100% on top of your game. To realize, maybe today I am just going to take it a bit easier than I would do otherwise. Maybe today I'm not going to push myself 100% with this thing or that thing. And by doing that, you're being a bit kinder with yourself. And it's not that you're not out there living your life. You are, but you're choosing to shelter a little bit. You're choosing to recognize that the storm of OCD is really blowing very hard this particular day. And you need to kind of be patient with yourself. Maybe if you had specific plans to do a really difficult exposure activity, well, maybe during that particular moment, that isn't the best time to do that exposure activity. Maybe you could do that the next day when things have calmed down a little bit, or if it's the morning and you're really struggling with the anxiety that particular morning, and it's a real struggle, well, maybe you can be patient with yourself and wait until the afternoon to do something that you've been planning to do. And I think this is really important. Sometimes we need to learn when to wait and shelter and to rest in the harbor and to kind of trust and hope, to have some faith that things will get better again, that the storm will die down again if we have patience, if we are hopeful and recognize that, OCD is something that kind of comes and goes with the wind. It has its own kind of force. And, if we try to control it, as we know, it tends to get worse. But if we just allow it to do what it wants to do, almost like a storm, if we just wait and watch that storm, ideally, from the harbor, we'll see all the waves, see all the currents, see all the rain coming down and just observe it, and then, wait, because at some point things will die down and then we can get back on with doing whatever it is that we need to do. And, for me, I think this is a really, really helpful metaphor. Here's a quote from the story that I think encapsulates the message of this metaphor quite well. All day they fished in a seething sea. The waves were so high and the clouds were so low that they soon lost sight of the shore. And all the time the great storm cat played with the little boat, striking it and then losing it, but never quite sinking it. And to me, this is, so often what it's like when OCD is playing with us, when the storm of OCD is striking at us. It feels like we're going to get sunk, but we're not. We're able to recognize, if we choose to focus our attention and keep it ideally where it should be, that, despite the challenge of the OCD and the difficulties with the strong emotions that come up, we're able to navigate our way back to the harbor, back through that mouse hole. And it may seem incredibly difficult at times, but when we keep our attention where we need it to be, to recognize that, this storm is going to play itself out eventually. And our job is just to observe the storm, to kind of allow it to be, to not demand that it has to disappear straight away, and to just be patient and kind of compassionate with ourselves. Experiencing these kinds of storms, unfortunately, is what it's like, to struggle with anxiety and OCD. But when we have that patience and that kind of determination, and to recognize that, we will be okay, we get into this more hopeful mindset. And hope is such an important word when it comes to OCD. We need to have hope. We need to have faith, and we need to find that from somewhere. And I think for me, the place I was able to find that was actually, through practicing acceptance commitment therapy over an extended period of time. Learning that when I left OCD alone and I stopped trying to figure it out, I stopped trying to have that certainty. Effectively, I stopped, going out through that mouse hole into the middle of the storm, trying to problem solve it, trying to figure it out, when I didn't necessarily need to. The more that I realized that to be true, and that I kind of rested in the harbor, I tried to have hope that the storm would pass. Well, I think, the more it's demonstrated to me that this is true, and that helps then to create more hope. And, from this, you can build a sense of empowerment in your life, a sense of, okay, like I may not be able to control the storms of OCD, but I can control my response to it. And I can develop this ability to be a bit more hopeful, and these days I view it as more of a kind of skill rather than something that is inherent in us. When we learn to focus on things like hope and faith and even gratitude, I think these things are things that really can support us with managing OCD in the long term. So that's it for today. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I'll put a link to the Mousehole Cat in the show notes in case you were interested in checking that out. It's a really great children's story. And many thanks. Please do subscribe. I would really, really appreciate that. And see you next time.